Hey, party people. So I am just back after being kind of MIA a little bit with vlogs and training footage and whatnot. I've just been pretty busy with work and some things on the back end with my coaching business. Had to take some time to kind of reevaluate a little bit of my business model and how I kind of do things, just so I can give my clients the best experience I possibly can, and just improve myself as a coach. But I wanted to just give a few training updates. You can kind of just see like what I've recently been doing. But I also wanted to talk about a couple big helpful topics regarding training. And particularly with singles and how you should use singles in training. Should you keep them year round, and the utility of them. So first off, I think that singles are something that is way more important if you're a power lifter to practice and keep in programming. And the whole reason why is because that is literally the sport. It is about how good are you at a 1 rep max. And so keeping in some sport specific work year round is important. A really great way to use a single is using a submaximal RPE, or at, let's say, whatever your goal RPE is for that week. So let's say you have a 3x6 on bench press, but you want to keep that at an RPE 7. Well, what you can do is work up to a heavy single when your warm-up sets at an RPE 7 and use that to gauge your level of preparedness for that day. So for example, let's say you have a number in mind. You want to hit, 275 pounds on bench for a single, and in your mind that's going to be an RPE 7. If that is not an RPE 7, that's more of an 8 or 9, that tells you a lot about, okay, how should my back down sets or working sets look for that day? If it's easier, then you can probably go a little bit higher on your working sets and not drop down as much for the back offs. Alternatively, um, singles have something to do with a post-activation potentiation effect, which basically means that when you so there's something called the principle of early recruitment. So your body will recruit type 1 muscle fibers and type 2 muscle fibers during training. Type 1 muscle fibers are always recruited first, then type 2 will be recruited second. If you do a heavier single before your working sets or whatnot, you will kind of excite your neurons a little bit more, make them more prepared for subsequent back off work and more of your volume, just by recruiting more of those muscle fibers. You have essentially made your body more prepared to lift heavier loads. As a result of doing a single, you can potentially improve performance outcomes on your back off sets, and you can also gauge your level of preparedness for that day. So usually how I recommend doing that is I include singles as a part of my warm-up year-round. That's how I use it and when I give my clients. So with the bar working weights, work up to a single at whatever that week's RPE is, and then use that to gauge your level of preparedness for that day, and then you can kind of go off of it. Now I will say, unless you're in peaking block, I would not go above RPE 9 on a single, just because there's not really much benefit to going RPE 10 in training. The only time that you really want to go RPE 10 is in a competition setting. As a bodybuilder, the efficacy of this doesn't really make that much sense outside of the whole post-activation potentiation set. Powerlifter, it's a little bit sport specific, and also keeping that skill in. So that's enough about singles. The second thing I wanted to talk about is over cueing in lifts, and when should you use cues and how should you use them? Because a lot of times what people will do is they will think too much when they're lifting. They'll think about 5,000 things during their working sets. Let's say in a squat. Okay, got to point my toes out this much, my hips need to move this way, my shoulders, my breathing, all this stuff. They'll think about a lot of this stuff while they're doing all their working weight. You should think about your cues when you're warming up. So you can think about more of your cues, getting yourself a really, really good spot, and reinforcing those good technique patterns when you are warming up for that working weight, when you are getting that those sets in, when you are preparing yourself for that movement. when you are actually moving the weight, you should only be thinking about one or two main things, besides lift the weight up and put it back down, obviously, so that you don't die and you can make gains. But for example, when you're lifting weights, when you're doing a deadlift, for example, you can think about quick hips. So basically, or and I want to keep my really solid tight brace. Squat, big toe down, and then brace hard. Bench, I want to push back towards my face, and keep my butt down. That's basically the extent of what you want to think about when you are lifting. Because if you're thinking too much, it's the equivalent of having somebody try to have a conversation with you in between your set. It's just too much, and you're going to end up not really getting as much out of the set as you possibly could, and probably to just be frustrated and have paralysis by analysis. So it is good to be methodical, but use it at the right times, and when it is time to focus on just the working weights,